Now the record's to break. Non-stop means no going to port, no being above the high water line. It means I can anchor. I can anchor in a sheltered bay or harbor to do repairs. And I can actually go on shore, but I must stay below the high water line. And I can't touch anybody. I can't even receive a newspaper or a loaf of bread. That's what it means by non-assisted. Can't receive spare parts or anything. Next is the oldest to have done so. Dodge Morgan's 54. I'll be 76. Fastest in a cruising boat. My goal, 120 days. And then a new record, about 130 days from St. Augustine and back. And first ever green, as I mentioned. Solar, wind, and hydro generators, and lithium-ion potassium batteries. Now, here's the route that Dodge Morgan took. On the left-hand side there, top left, you'll see where he started out in Bermuda and went under South Africa, under Australia, close to New Zealand. And if at that point on my trip, I'm 10 days ahead of Morgan, I'll go closer to New Zealand for a media event so they can film me from the boats, and then I'll pass on by. I'll lose a few hours, but not much. And if I've got a 10-day cushion, I'll be okay with that. Then I go under South America, turn the corner, and head for home. This gives you the sort of detail of his 150-day trip. And you see a boat doesn't go in a straight line always. It's got wind to contend with. And you see how I've marked the days there. That map is a chart is on my boat, and I'll be looking at it daily and putting my pin in there as to where I am. So days to complete Dodge Morgan, he did 150 days. That was an average of 171 miles a day for a total of 26,000 miles at 7.1 knots. That's not hard to attain, 7.1 knots, but there are days when you'll do a lot more and a lot less in the doldrums. There are the names on the boat that people paid to support my son's effort, and I'm asking people to consider the same to support physical therapy research. Special features, well, my keel goes up and down from 8'7" to 14. There are 4 water balance tanks, 5 watertight bulkheads, retractable bowsprit, 2 outriggers, and entirely green. Now here's some pictures of the finished boat. Well, nearly finished. At Lyman Moss Boat Yards in Thomaston, Maine. She's being lowered into the water, and I'm standing there. I'm in the brighter colored jacket, a yellow jacket, and I'm next to Bruce Farr, the designer of the boat. I'm standing with some other people there on the day of the launch. Here she is, about to go into the water, and here she is underway. Now, there's a lot of technology on this boat, and you can probably see up the top of the picture 2 wind generators, and then you'll see a communications Inmarsat dome, and then a radar, which is gimbaled, so it's horizontal. And then the American flag is flying. And then if you come down the back, you can see some obstacles, and I'll come in closer on those. And if you look to the middle of the screen on the left, you'll see something that looks like an outboard engine. It's got a little propeller on it. Well, there are 4 of them across the boat. Those are the hydro generators. When I lower them down into the water, they'll spin and create the power that I need to do the autopilot, communications, refrigeration, everything else that the boat requires. There are 4 of those. They're very vulnerable to impact, and I'll be carrying spare parts, of course, for almost everything on the boat. Here she's underway again, different angles. She's a very pretty boat, and I like the color scheme. It's quite striking. She's comfortable, too. And when I put water in the water ballast tanks, she comes more upright and has more punching power through the waves, and again is more comfortable at that situation. Here are some details on sail areas, if you're particularly interested in this kind of detail. Some sailors are. You might notice I have the 3 standard sails, a mainsail, which is the big one on the mast, and then a Genoa, which goes forward of the mast, and then a smaller up-front sail called a staysail. So in heavier weather, I'd put that up. But in very light weather, I have 2 spinnakers, an A2 and an A6. The A6 is smaller than the A2 and much heavier quality, and I can carry it to 30 knots of wind. And knot, by the way, is about 1.1 miles per hour. So 30 knots of wind is about 33 miles per hour. I then have a very light code 0, then storm trysail and storm jib for, obviously, storms. Very, very strong, heavy sails. Here's a picture of the interior. To the left, you'll see the dining area and lounge. And to the right, you'll see forward there the galley. And notice that there are the handrails around the galley are for both grabbing and for stopping things flying away. And the sinks there, you see one sink, a very deep sink. All sinks, two of them, are very deep. So again, things don't slosh out. And to the right is the nav station, which you now see here. When I first saw the design of this and all the material, I thought, goodness me, this is space age. And it really is. There's a lot of stuff there, and I'm still learning how most effectively to use all the ability that it has. I say right now that I'm 80% ready with 6 months to go, and the boat's about 85% ready. So I'm lagging a little bit behind, but I'm on a steep learning curve. That box right on the desk there, well, that's a Panasonic waterproof, drop-proof computer. Now, electronics I have for communications, I have a VHF radio and a single sideband radio. Probably won't use the single sideband at all, but I might use it for listening to radio broadcasts. The Iridium is a phone, like a cell phone, a bit bigger, and I'll be using that probably quite a bit. And then the Inmarsat, that's able to, also a telephone, but it's attached to the boat. I can't take it with me. So if I have to abandon the ship because she's going down and get into my life rafts, well, then I take the Iridium with me, and I would have communication. For observation, I have radar, and we all know what radar is. Then I have a radar detector, something that will sound an alarm if somebody else's radar is in my area. But the great innovation of the last few years is the automatic identification system, the AIS. Now on my chart screen, up comes every ship in the area. And there's a triangle, and I can see by the triangle which way the boat's going. If I put the cursor on the triangle, it gives me the name. If I ident, it gives me all the information on this ship that I'm looking at, the ship, other sailboat, whatever. And provided we stay on the same course, both of us relative to one another, the AIS will tell me whether we're safe from one another, meaning we're not going to collide, how close we will get at the closest point of contact, approximation, and finally, when that will occur, like 18 minutes from now, 22 minutes from now. It's a wonderful piece of equipment. Everyone should have one. Emergencies, I have an EPIRB. If I pull that plug, it sends up a signal. It says, you know, I'm in an emergency situation, goes up to satellites, Coast Guard and everybody else picks it up. They know exactly where I am, and they could be on their way. I have two of them because I use the 30-minute rule. One will go off in an emergency. It could go off automatically, or it could go off manually. But at that point, you don't know, or the authorities don't know whether it was an accident or not. It just went off accidentally. But when another one goes off in 30 minutes' time, exactly, or around about that, they will know that the first one wasn't an accident, because there's another one at 30 minutes, and that was the protocol that I sort of agreed to. And they'll know another thing, too, is that I am definitely needing help, and I am alive. So please double up your efforts in getting there if you can. Although I do personally, philosophically believe that when we go out there by ourselves, we are taking risks, and we have no right to expect anybody else to risk their lives and their resources to pick us up. But if they'd like to, we'd certainly appreciate it. And then I have a personal EPIRB that is on my safety harness, and the safety harness I'll be wearing all the time. Then on the other category, I have a yellow brick. That's something that will broadcast my position about 4 times a day. Anyone can monitor that on my webpage, www.stanleyparis.com, and you can see where I am, what speed I'm doing at all times, 4 times a day. It'll just show it right up there. Then something else, I have autopilots, because you can't stay awake 24 hours a day. But I have an NKE, and one of the reasons I chose that particular brand of autopilot is around my neck, I will wear 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, something that's the size of a small golf puck. And that, around my neck, if I should ever fall overboard, be washed overboard or whatever, I shouldn't, because I should always be attached when I'm on deck in bad weather. But should it happen, then when I get about 100 feet behind the boat, this device will cause the boat to head up into the wind and begin to luff. And I'll be towing behind the boat about 75 feet back, a small float. I'll have a chance to get to that line and work my way back to the boat. That's a piece of equipment that wasn't available some years ago, and I think it could be a lifesaver. I hope never to have to use it. Now, what are the risks? Well, for starters, nobody will insure the boat. It's just too risky. The chances there are of collision, whales. Now, containers that fall off ships, logs, icebergs. And if you fall asleep, you can hit a coastline. Incidentally, on the subject of whales, my son hit a whale. It's a tragic thing, of course. He saw the blood in the water. But himself, personally, he had 2 ribs fractured from that collision. I could also lose my mast or a rudder. I will be carrying a spare rudder, and we're still working on the details of a mast. But it looks like we'll be carrying a big spinnaker pole with the means of hoisting it. Our boats can sink. They can sink. And then I have 2 life rafts. I can get washed or fall overboard. I hope not. Depression and suicide. Solar sailors have committed suicide, Donald Crowhurst being the most famous of them. And then, of course, if I have a medical emergency, and I am in very good health, but I am 76, should I have a stroke or a heart attack? Well, of course, that's a pretty bad situation out there by yourself. But life is not without risk. And I've taken lots of risks in my life, but what's more important, I've tried to do things to minimize those risks. So I've got a pretty full medical kit on board. I've taken some medical training. I am a physical therapist, but I went to a special course recently, and they know exactly what I've got on board because they gave me the kit. I call them on my phone, tell them what my signs and symptoms are. They'll make the diagnosis and tell me what to take and what to do. That's a service based out of the United Kingdom. The construction, well, there's 5 watertight bulkers, sacrificial bow, 2 rudders plus a spare, and a jury-rigged mast, electronics I've mentioned. And on deck, I'll have a line going on the outside of my safety lines all the way back to my ladder. And if I fall overboard and washed over but attached to the boat and can't climb back over those lifelines, the second tether on my harness goes to that line. I cut the first. I'll go flying back to the ladder. The ladder will be pulled out. With the weight of my body, I have a chance to climb back on again. The other features I've talked about. So the plan, start in St. Augustine, November the 30th at 4 p.m. of 2013. I have a cooperation agreement with the city. I'm helping to promote their 450th anniversary. I'm part of that program, and they hope the boat will help attract people to the city. It's the nation's oldest city, a tourist city, and we welcome people to come to our city. I'll be willing to work with educational programs, and I'm hopefully that some of those will develop. Publicity is certainly encouraged because it helps the builder in this economic time of hardship. Not a lot of people are building boats. So if I can help the boatyard that did such a fine job of my boat to do well, Lyman Morse, then so be it. And of course the architect themselves and the city will all benefit. So local and national press, we're getting quite a bit of it, television, and some of the elder and wellness magazines will carry it too. One other note, it's Corinthian. In other words, I'm not having any sponsors at all. I'm paying for this from my own out-of-pocket earnings, which have largely been in real estate, hotels, property development, and education. But if you want to put your name on the boat, you can for $100. For John Doe or John and Jane Doe, $150, the Doe family, $200. And all checks will be going to the Foundation for Physical Therapy. When, as I mentioned, November 1st, 2002. I got 2 regattas coming up, 2 races, the Bermuda 1-2 in June of 2013, and then later that month in early July, Marblehead to Halifax. These are 2 international races. One of them will be totally solo, the other will be with crew. And then I leave, as you say, November 30th at 4 p.m. And I hope to return 120 to 130 days later in 2014. So in summary, solo, non-stop, non-assisted circumnavigation. Fastest in a cruising yacht. Oldest by some 18 years. First ever green circumnavigation port to port. Challenge the old record of 150 days, hoping you do it in 120 plus or minus 10. Set a St. Augustine return record of approximately 130 days. The boat designed and built in America and sailed by an American. Ah, yes, I'm also a New Zealander. I have the privilege of being a dual citizen. And so I want to thank you for watching this. If you have any questions, just ask them in the blog, and I'll be very, very pleased to have them answered for you, either myself personally or one of the team here on standby, ready to do that. I wish you well. Thank you for your interest in Kiwi Spirit, and I hope you wish me well too. Thank you.